Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Season 10, Episode 29 of the DFO Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Brock Segan. With me, as always, we got Dylan Deberthy and Michael Beebs Bondy. Beebs, me and you are going head-to-head in our Dynasty League right now, and quite the battle. We've been near the top of the standings all season. We talked about a potential second-round matchup, and it is happening. It is going down, and it's been an exciting start so far. And then me and D on a collision course in the finals in a couple leagues, so could be a lot of podcasts. How did you put it last week, Beebs? Cross-pollination going on here?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to start by talking about our matchup, Brock? We could tell.
No, I don't really want to talk about it yet. It's
I didn't want to be too confident because we have only done 2 days so far, and there are 5 more in the week. And knowing me, I'll shoot myself in the foot by getting too confident. But let's just say our day-to-day work week has changed a little bit. As news comes out, it's me versus Brock, basically sprinting to go get players off the wire, go get goalies that are starting. As basically, and it's been a lot of fun battling you, Brock. But I won't lie, I'm glad this isn't every week. I also heard from one of the owners on the other side, because there's 4 teams left, and he said basically he's like, we have agreed on our side that we're pretty much giving up on the top pickup because you guys are clearly all over it. He's like, but it's been kind of fun to watch you guys work the wire together and then compare it to news coming out. So yeah, that's the perk we get by running DFO during the day, but it turns into us battling like monsters once the playoffs come around. So yeah, it's been good battling. Can't wait to finish this out.
I'm just hoping that Will Smith drop by you a couple weeks ago that I scooped up ends up paying huge dividends over the weekend. That'd be nice. But D, looks like me and you could meet in 2 finals if everything goes according to plan. How's your third league going?
We are looking good in that one as well. I'll be happy if 2 out of 3 would be great. I just want 1 to keep us going through the end of the season, so I don't have to feign my interest here next week on the show. But we're looking pretty good right now. 3 for 3 is still well within the realm of possibility, but we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, if me and D go 0 for this week, Beebs can run the show by himself next week. We'll leave D. Beebs will just run the show and take you guys across the finish line. Take you guys to the finish line. But yeah, obviously, if you're still listening, you're still kicking. So that's great news for you. Congratulations on getting this far. And if maybe you're just listening to us talk, appreciate you anyway. But yeah, so similar to last week, gonna be a nice quick show. Just kind of cover your bases here for this weekend and into next week. Obviously, if you're in the weeks 22 through 24 playoffs, you're in the finals right now, which I know is a very popular format. So probably got a lot of listeners in the finals as we speak. And then if you're in the 23 to 25 week playoff, obviously next week would be the finals. So we're going to start the show off with our week 24 weekend streamers. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams that have a Friday, Sunday schedule this weekend. We're going to go through them from the best schedule to the worst schedule, give you our favorite streams from that team for each team. Then we'll take a look ahead to next week. I guess it's kind of like the next 11 days because it's an 11-day final in week 25. And we are going to go through the strength of schedule, highlight the teams with the most light nights and the best light night schedules to give you the best streaming options for next week. So we're going to do it similar to last week where I'm just going to kind of talk and then go to you guys and gauge your interest on certain players, certain teams, and get an idea of who your favorite pickups are. We'll start with the Washington Capitals. They've got the best schedule this weekend. They've got the Chicago Blackhawks in Washington on Friday, and then they're on Long Island to face the Islanders on Sunday. The unfortunate thing with the Capitals is they really don't have anybody on the wire, or they didn't have anybody on the wire that was worth picking up, right? They're a very top heavy team. Their top 6 basically does all the scoring, and none of those guys really available on the wire. Well, Ryan Leonard signed out of college this week, and he hit waivers a day ago on Yahoo. So he will be coming available. It depends on your league format. One of my leagues, he's available as of tomorrow on the waiver wire. And another one of my leagues, he's available the following day. So either way, you'll be able to scoop him before their Friday game against the Blackhawks. Leonard, obviously one of the emerging top prospects in the game, 8th overall pick in 2023, finished up his second year at Boston College with 30 goals and 19 assists in 37 games, back-to-back 30-goal seasons, was also a standout for Team USA at the World Juniors this year with 10 points, 5 goals in 7 games. So just an absolutely talented young offensive player, and the Capitals haven't hesitated to put him in a prominent role right away. He is on the second line as of tonight with Protas and Dylan Strome, so obviously a spot there in which he can succeed right away. And he's really the only guy from the Washington Capitals that you can even conceivably look at picking up outside of like a shallow league Protas, maybe McMichael, but he's dropped down the lineup a little bit. I think Leonard's kind of your only option. Beebs, what are your thoughts here with the Caps?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's kind of you got to work with what you got, and when you have teams where there's really not much to work with, grabbing a guy that's 0% owned, obviously due to him being in the NCAA, is sometimes the call. He came from just the highest level, playing in the NCAA tournament, and just stepped on the ice 2 days later. So they announced tonight that they wanted to get him back in just to prove on a back-to-back that he can stay at that NHL level. So it just shows that they're going to keep him in that position to succeed. He's obviously part of the plan heading into the playoffs. And if that's going to happen, you can definitely jump on board with it. 30 goals in 37 games, as you mentioned, NCAA that's no joke. That's a pure goal scorer. If you watch him play, he plays a very mature game, and I think that should translate very well. So I think this is a good pickup here for what you're working with on the weekend, and I think someone, as you mentioned, that you can kind of sneak under people's noses just because they can't even grab them yet. So definitely feel free to keep an eye here on one of the potential superstars in years to come, Ryan Leonard. He's very exciting.
I do like Mangiapane too. Like,
yeah,
we're going to go through the options here, and it's not like, there's a ton of really prime streaming options that we're going to be on the rest of the team. It's kind of the same story, especially more competitive leagues with a lot of these better, high-end names we're going to talk about most likely aren't going to be available in your league. So he wouldn't be my first recommendation, but in one of our leagues yesterday, Brock, I had Brady Tkachuk get announced out, so had an extra spot and was just looking to get a couple of extra games in, at least for the Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll see if I hold on to him for Friday, Sunday, but did pick up Mangiapane in that league. Obviously, didn't do anything last night, and his ice time is rather limited, but, he's still a decent bet to, find the back of the net and see some time on that second power play unit, which does see a little bit of run because Ovi just tends to just stay out there for the entire power play. So it's not as if the second unit gets no run whatsoever. He's got some talent skating with him on that third line with McMichael. So I do think there's a possibility that Mangiapane could help you out this weekend if none of these other options that we're going to talk about are available.
Yeah, and through 4 periods of his NHL career so far, and Ryan Leonard does have 4 hits, so banger leagues might be able to chip in a little bit that way over the weekend. One of my favorite websites, hockeyprospecting.com, they do a terrific job with young prospects, and so NHLE, the equivalent of the production he had in NCAA in his draft, in his first year in NCAA was a 52 NHLE, this year 48. So that's kind of the rough idea of how many points you could expect Ryan Leonard to put up over an 82 game season. Just to give you an idea, he's basically a 50-point player coming from the NCAA. To potentially your roster here for the final stretch of the season, at least this weekend. I mean, you got to like what you get here with Chicago and the Islanders. And I agree with you where it's like, you might want to look a little bit deeper in this Capitals roster because their schedule compared to the other teams for the Friday, Sunday schedule is much, much better than the rest. You might want to dig a little bit deeper in the Capitals than kind of scraping the top of some of these other teams with tougher matchups. The second,
especially if they get a lead on one of these teams like Chicago or New York, then they're likely you're not gonna overpower your top line. You're gonna roll with these deeper guys. So I think that they make a great suggestion there. Obviously, it's super hypothetical, but that could also help Leonard get up higher than his 14 minutes of ice time that we saw in his debut. So hopefully they just kind of roll these teams, and it just means let's feed the boys some ice and see what they can do.
It could happen. My only thought is good luck pulling Ovi off the ice in a blowout.
Not even off. Just right, you roll your lines a little bit more than
he's just up. Quadruple shifting with all 4 lines. It's funny too, the Mangiapane shout out, because like he was kind of like a sneaky streamer for years in Calgary because he had great shot volume, and it's just completely fallen by the wayside this year with the lack of ice time in Washington. So hopefully, we know that shot volume's there lurking beneath the surface. The Minnesota Wild are next. We talked about them quite a bit last week. Marco Rossi, 33% rostered. He'd be a guy that in most competitive leagues likely isn't available, but bit of a sluggish period here for him, and he would be a player that likely, if there was a roster crunch and people were getting desperate to cut players, he'd be one that certainly would be at the top of the list. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that in competitive leagues he could be surfacing on the waiver wire. Ryan Hartman, he's been probably the hottest of the available Minnesota Wild as of late, and then a guy you talked about last week, Frederick Gaudreau, Marcus Johansson, those guys are still kind of out there, and Mark Foligno's actually kind of perked up. He's on the top line right now with Rossi and Boldy kind of becoming a little bit interesting. Obviously, he's a pretty solid banger league target. Obviously, he's already owned in some banger leagues, given the fact that he's up to 12% roster. But he's a guy that's going to be out there. He's up to 231 hits on the season, so he's a guy that's going to be out there 3 hits per game, and he's picked up some offense as of late too. A goal and 2 assists in his last 2 games coming into tonight. So those are the top options from the Minnesota Wild. Of all those options, D, which one would be your favorite from the Wild right now?
Yeah, it's obviously Rossi. At the same time, he's the least likely to be available. I think it's kind of a toss-up with the rest and just kind of who you feel the best about. I just like Freddie Gaudreau a lot. He's on the ice a ton. He's on the first power play unit right now. Getting exposure to the likes of Boldy and Zuccarello on that top unit, skating with Zuccarello at 5v5 and with Johansson, 2 pass-first guys. So I just think he's got a good chance of finding the back of the net this weekend. So I still really like Gaudreau. I think Johansson himself is a good shout if you're just looking to maybe play a little safer and tally an assist or 2 over the weekend. Johansson's certainly a really good bet, almost like a really cheap and lesser version of his line mate Zuccarello. And then even in deeper leagues, I think you can take a kick at the can with Gus Nyquist too. He scored tonight, also on that top power play unit, playing with Hartman at 5v5. So yeah, with the injuries that they're dealing with, they've had to kind of go with a deeper approach to this lineup, and it's making some of these guys a little bit more valuable.
I was about to look into Nyquist, and then I realized he had the 3 points in 15 games, but he's a guy who can get hot. And as you mentioned, with him scoring tonight, that might be all he needs to just kick in and start actually giving them a little bit of value, which is what they went for when they acquired him right before the trade deadline. I have to agree with D here, though. I think it's Freddie Gaudreau just being that first line power play guy. There's always a chance for a sneaky assist at that point, right? If you get that first draw on the other team's end, all you got to do is kick one back, and next thing you know, we got a PPA and a point for Freddie Gaudreau, who you basically picked up not expecting much. So I think, like D said, he demands ice time, and when he is out there, he's definitely putting himself in position for some fantasy points. So out of those 3, the pickings is slim, but give me Gaudreau. So I'd probably go Gaudreau, Hartman, Nyquist, Foligno. Wow, I don't even know why I'm rating them. That's insane.
Yeah, I think mine's actually probably Hartman. I just think the shot volume is a little bit safer there, but I think it's obviously pretty close. Both playing very similar roles right now, but 2.7 shots per game over his last 12 games for Hartman's been solid. Gaudreau, definitely somebody that can chip in though, and when you take a look at it against the Islanders on Long Island on Friday, in Dallas or at home against Dallas on Sunday, the Stars are a team that really have struggled defensively since losing Miro Heiskanen. So pretty decent matchups there. And like I said, maybe the Capitals aren't going to be available to you, but the Minnesota Wild definitely the second strongest schedule, and you might want to dig a little bit deeper into that lineup rather than going to the Chicago Blackhawks, who are in Washington on Friday and then at home against the Penguins on Sunday. So a little bit of a more difficult schedule, but Beebs, we know you're going to love Teuvo Teravainen, who's available at 21% owned right now. Obviously, Ryan Donato would be the top pick, but he's nearly 50% rostered at 46%. But if he's somehow available in your league, he would be clearly the top option there. Then you got Tyler Bertuzzi, and then the suddenly hot Ilya Mikheyev. I don't know if we ever saw that coming, but I don't even know why I'm asking this, Beebs, but why is Teuvo Teravainen your favorite?
He's not. Well, I mean, if we take out classic Ryan Donato, I just more wanted to mention Donato must have heard Brock last week, because you mentioned, he went a little cold, and then he decided to go on a 4-game point streak where he put up 8 points in those 4 games. So he's the guy is just going crazy. So if you haven't added him yet, same old song and dance. He's in a fantastic position to succeed, and he continues to do so. 30 points in his last 23 games. Donato was in the top 10 in scoring in the whole league in March. So if you picked him up off waivers at the beginning of March, when he was closer to, I believe it was 10-15%, then you absolutely got basically the same value as a first-round pick for Ryan Donato in Chicago, which is crazy. So yeah, as you know, he's clearly my top here. But yeah, if we're going through the bottom three, I will backtrack and say between Teravainen, Bertuzzi, and Mikheyev, it is Teravainen. He's continued to succeed, continued to be assist heavy. He still has 22 points in his last 22 games. That's very solid. But as mentioned last week, he's just going to give you assists, not a ton of shots. But if you're going for random points at the bottom of the wire, makes it even decent option here. But just put Tyler Bertuzzi at the bottom of this list. And quick shout out, as you said, for someone no one expected to be here, Ilya Mikheyev finding himself in the top six. It's a classic case of someone has to play top line minutes. And if we're going to mention Frank Nazar last week, we definitely should mention Ilya Mikheyev this week. In his last 16 games, he has 12 points, 7 of which are goals. So it's not even like he's just feeding off secondary apples or anything like that. And what kind of blew my mind about this whole thing is he has 35 shots on goal in those 16 games. So he's just below 3 shots per game, which for Ilya Mikheyev, you're getting fantastic production there at that with where he's at. And if he's going to play there, which they've kind of proven they're just going to probably leave him there in the top 6, you might as well get some production out of it. So I think he should definitely be more owned than 1%, but also I don't think anyone knows he's even in the league still. So that's part of it.
The one thing that freaks me out about Mikheyev is that, you've got the Blackhawks have shown a willingness to just change the lineup every night. Like the line are always different. So Mikheyev has 5 points in his last 5 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, and like you said, 14 shots on goal in those 5 games. So he's kind of coming on here late and is a reasonable option in those deeper formats. D, any additional thoughts here on the Blackhawks?
No, I just think Bertuzzi is a decent, high upside play if you're in a tough spot heading into the weekend. He scored 20 goals on the season, and they have come in bunches when he has found the back of the net. He scored in consecutive games 5 times already this year, and that's the kind of upside that we're looking for off the wire if you're in a desperate spot heading into the weekend. So if you're got a big deficit to make up in points leagues, or if you're chasing goals this weekend, I do think Bertuzzi could be worth rolling the dice on.
Yeah, and obviously he was, really seeing limited ice time there for a little while in kind of late February, early March, but it's perking back up. He's been over 17 minutes in 3 of his last 5 games, averaging just over 16 and a half minutes during that stretch. So he's playing a little bit more as well. Next on the list is the New York Islanders. Probably not a whole lot to talk about here, but Anders Lee obviously presents pretty good shot volume. What did he have? 11 shots on goal there over the weekend or something outrageous? 10 shots. 10 shots on goal in 21 shifts. You just love.
Yeah, he's not Mason McTavish.
Yeah, it's true enough. So Lee obviously presents really good shot volume. He's been pretty steady as of late as well. A guy that we've talked about a lot as a streamer this year. In the month of March, 9 points in 16 games, including 54 shots on goal and 86 shot attempts. Incredible stuff. But he is 46% rostered, so chances are pretty slim that he's even available in your league. So to me, the only one that I'm really strongly considering is Kyle Palmieri, who continues to play big minutes with basically nobody left in that lineup. You basically. It's him and Bo Horvat and Anders Lee, and that's kind of it right now. Since the trade deadline, he has 6 points in 11 games, but he's 30 shots and 60 shot attempts during that stretch. I don't recommend picking up Anthony Duclair, who Patrick Waugh literally said is lucky to even be in the lineup. He was so bad. But do you guys have anybody else different other than Palmieri that you're looking at, D?
No, to be quite honest with you, I'd rather take a chance at some of those deeper options that we've already mentioned on the Caps, the Wild, and the Blackhawks. The matchups just aren't great. And like you said, there's just not a whole lot to really lean into here and buy into in this lineup aside from that top line. The nice thing is that they're getting all that run together, right? With Palmieri, Horvat, and Lee. And there's not a whole lot of guys you want exposure to in that lineup, but those are the 3 and they're playing together. So I do think Palmieri, amongst the options that we talked about that could realistically be available in some more competitive formats. I don't think anyone, in those sort of leagues is holding on to him season long, but they might have already beat you to the punch with this weekend schedule coming up. But if he's out there, I think he's as good of any option as that we've talked about so far on this show. And for him to be out there in over 80% of leagues, certainly notable. And yeah, good as bad as anyone to find the back of the net this weekend.
Anybody for you, Beebs?
Kind of a cop-out, but on defense, Tony DeAngelo, he's only 24% owned. He's actually been on quite a torrid pace. We've been mentioning him since he came back from the KHL, but even in his last 8 games, or in his last 9 games, he has 8 points, 20 shots on goal. So he's over 2 shots a game. He's playing power play 1, And if you're in need of some help on the back end or just to steal a couple points, this is definitely a decent way to do it. If we were to put together a whole season for Tony D, he would be in the top 30 in defensive scoring with the numbers that he's put up already. So you have to pay some attention when that's happening. And like we said, he's on the top power play. I'm not going to mention any forwards because Simon Holmstrom decided to make me look like a big old dummy last week, and therefore he's in my doghouse. And Simon, I'm sorry, pal, but you're gonna be in my doghouse for a while, potentially the whole summer. So that's just how that one goes. So yeah, Tony D, you're my shout out. Only 24% owned. Kind of blew my mind with the way he's been playing. Consistent as hell.
Yeah, he's honestly in consideration for me. One league because we have 3 D spots, but I've been running 2 defensemen as of late just because there wasn't a whole lot on the wire. But he has become available, and over the weekend might be somebody that I need. So, like if you're in a situation like me where it might make sense just to round out your blue line, not a terrible option. But obviously, I think higher upside forwards are the better play. But if you're desperate and you need Islanders, D'Angelo might be your best bet.
Like I'm playing Hannafin in the same league, who I believe is like 60% owned, and unfortunately, I shouldn't tell you this, but I'm out of pickups for the defense position that I can afford to that. So I'm looking at that. I would way rather have him than Hannafin, and so if that's the case, make the swap and do what you do.
And D, you alluded to it already. Tougher matchups. Obviously, we've been going in order of strength of schedule over the weekend, but they have 2 home games, but it's against the Wild and the Capitals, 2 pretty good defensive teams. But the worst of the group this weekend, unfortunately, is my Detroit Red Wings. They have the Hurricanes, who they never beat or even score against, and the Florida Panthers on Sunday. So the matchups are horrendous. Honestly, Marco Kasper is probably the only one that I would even consider. He's the only one that gets kind of, an actual run in terms of time on ice that's consistent on a night-to-night basis. He's surrounded by decent, it was better when he was with DeBrincat and Kane. I wouldn't be shocked if they go back to that. But he played 20 minutes against the Blues last night. The game before that, he was at 19 minutes, plays a lot. He's got solid numbers here in the second half of the season. He's the only one that I would even remotely consider. Like guys like Vladimir Tarasenko are out there too, but now that he's back on the third line, I think obviously he's not nearly as an exciting pickup as Marco Kasper is. To give you an idea, Kasper 5 goals in his last 10 games, 7 points during that stretch. Beebs, D, anybody else from the Red Wings that you would even remotely consider? Feel free to just shake your head no.
I just wanted to shout out Kasper, 26 hits in his last 10 games. That's 2.6 hits a game. So if you're in a banger league, sneaky choice there. As Brock mentioned, 5 goals, 7 points in his last 10. But other than that, I'm not pumping any tires on this Detroit team. D, I don't know if you got any sleepers, but feel free to shoot one out there if you do.
I do think JT Compher has like a believable path to production, but I would put him at the very bottom of the list of all of these names that we've talked about here.
Yeah. Gets on the score sheet every now and again. Not super regularly, but he's been relatively productive as of late. His last 4 games, 2 goals, 2 assists during that stretch in his last 4 games. So point per game player in his last 4, maybe getting hot at the right time for your fantasy team. That is going to do it for the week 24 weekend streamers. Now let's take a look ahead at week 25. So again, some teams have better schedules than these guys, but these are the teams with the most late night games. So we are doing them in order of most late night games and best late night schedules. The best late night schedule is the Edmonton Oilers. So next week they have 6 games in total, 5 late nights, which is the most of any team. A couple teams we're going to talk about here have 5 late nights. Some of them have 4, but the Oilers have tied for the most late night games and have the best late night schedule overall. The one player that sticks out to me is Viktor Arvidsson. Basically seeing an extended run here with Leon Draisaitl this season, and given the injuries and kind of all the lineup swapping that they've done this season, Arvidsson's like the one guy that I think you can look at and confidently say, like, I kind of know where he's going to be in the lineup next week. Jeff Skinner kind of in and out. He's played a little bit more recently, but like if McDavid comes back, how are things going to shake out? In terms of the lines at practice today, does not look like McDavid is quite ready yet. It was still Puck, Coles, and Draisaitl, Arvidsson. It was Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, Kapanen, Skinner.
Frederick's going to come back before.
Yeah, Frederick will be the first guy back of their injured players. So, like Skinner skating with Janmark and Brown right now, you can't recommend him. Maybe you can recommend Kasperi Kapanen skating with Nuge and Hyman, but I think Arvidsson is the guy that I feel the best about. D, how about you? Where are you looking at anybody else from the Oilers right now?
No, I agree with you. The only other name that I think is worth mentioning specifically for banger leagues is Podkolzin, playing on that top line with Draisaitl and Arvidsson. He's got 189 hits on the season, so he just consistently delivers in that category for you, and then has the chance to find the score sheet, obviously skating with Draisaitl at 5v5.
Beebs, anybody for you?
Actually, surprisingly, just keep it on Calvin Pickard. If you do need goalie help, it's not the greatest choice, but it doesn't seem like Stuart Skinner's going to come back. And if he puts on another show tonight, played quite well the other night in their 3-2 victory. If he does play well again, he could definitely be worth consideration. I know personally I'm staying away because he burned me last week, but it's always good to have options.
I mean, looked good obviously against Vegas last night. So I think you could do worse. 5 light nights next week, man. Like if you need some goalie help, I think 18% rostered Pickard is an outstanding shootout right now. Back-to-back wins. He's stopped 46 of 50 shots in those 2 games, so he's definitely capable of delivering. The schedule is obviously fairly favorable as well, so I like Pickard at 18% if you need goalie help without question. Now, I don't think that if you would have told me in October that basically everybody's fantasy hockey season is going to hinge on the back of the San Jose Sharks, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But here we are. San Jose Sharks have the second best light night schedule. They have 6 games in total, 5 light nights. So tied with the Oilers for the second most, are the most light nights. Tyler Toffoli, 37% rostered. William Eklund, 20% rostered. And Will Smith, 12% rostered. All 3 of them playing in the top 6. All 3 of them seeing power play time. This is a team that in the second half of the season has shown a real ability to score. Maybe not always super consistent, but these 3, in addition to Macklin Celebrini, have been good. They've been fantasy assets without question. So I honestly like all 3 of them. I would probably stream all 3 of these guys before I would even pick up Viktor Arvidsson, to be honest with you. So I really, really like the San Jose Sharks. If you've got a couple spots to pick up 2 or even 3 of them, I mean, they could really help you win a championship next week. I'm happy that I've already got Will Smith on my team, but Beebs, is he your favorite of the bunch? Or you like Toffoli or Eklund more?
It's tough. You could literally put them all kind of throw them all in a bag and choose one, and you might get relatively the same production, but it's going to be good production, which is, I know that you said you'd rather have these than all of these and Viktor Arvidsson. I'm just going to make the statement I'd rather have all of these than everyone on this list going forward. It's crazy because I'm getting excited over Chicago and San Jose players, yet they are battling each other for the last place position in the league. So always fun when you're going for good players on bad teams. But back to this, I do think my favorite would still have to be Tyler Toffoli, strictly off of just the shot production. They are all shooting the puck a crap ton, to the point where I'm like, why is this team not peppering teams for 40 shots a game? Toffoli in his last 14 has 47 shots on goal. He only has 10 points. But if you compare that to William Eklund, he has 13 points, but only 35 shots on goal in his last 14. So I'll take the guy who's getting 12 more shots on goal across a 14-game span. It's just you're basically getting 1 more shot per game. And in the long run, that's more likely to have success. Also, Toffoli a little more goal likely than the other ones. But I would, Will Smith, 14 points his last 16, also shooting a ton, as I mentioned, 41 shots on goal in those 16 games. So they're all right there around 3 shots per game, which is pretty fantastic for how low owned they are. So I think my order here would be Tyler Toffoli, Will Smith, strictly because he has a little bit more goal potential than William Eklund, and then William Eklund third there. But as I mentioned, we can keep that same order for the rest of our guys that we mentioned. I love all 3 of these guys. If I can get all 3 of them after I knock Brock out, that'll be fantastic, because he's going to have to drop Will Smith this week when he makes a panic play. So I can't wait. D, how do you feel about these boys? Sharks are hungry.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're terrific options, all 3 of them. I would probably just be boring and rank them in terms of their ownership. It's kind of how I feel heading into next week with Toffoli, Eklund, and then Smith. But again, I think they're all great options. And yeah, if these guys aren't available, or maybe only 1 or 2 is available and you want to stack up, and particularly I think if you grab Eklund and you kind of want to put all your eggs in that basket, Alex Wennberg, 1% owned. He's playing with Eklund on the second line as well as the first power play unit. Does not shoot the puck a lot, so he's not going to be the most likely goal scorer. But if Eklund finds the back of the net, he'll almost certainly pick up a helper on it. His last 15 games, he's playing over 19 minutes a night. He's got 2 goals, 8 assists in that stretch. So with the amount of games that you're going to get out of him next week, I think he's a good bet to add, 3 to maybe even 4 points to your total. More than that if, they really pop off in a given night. So I think he's worth throwing out there, especially, like I said, if you just want to put your eggs in that basket. Stacking guys off the wire is never a bad idea because you need, half the amount of goals to pick up points if they're playing together. And Lundberg and Outland together at 5v5 as well as on the power play. So I think he's worth considering.
Yeah, just to reiterate some of the numbers that Beebs threw at you in the month of March, or I guess in the exact full last month of the season, 6 goals, 10 points in 14 games for Toffoli, 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points in 14 games for Smith, 5 goals, 8 assists, 13 points in 14 games for Eklund. So literally near a point per game for these three. Really, really solid. And cannot wait to win championships on the back of the San Jose Sharks. Next on the list is,
I would say just really crazy, just the fact that they've been doing it kind of all year, at least for the last little bit. Do you think with them being this low owned, usually it's like, oh, they're on a hot streak, no one's caught on. But we've been talking about Will Smith now for near a month and a half, 2 months. We've been talking about Eklund since day one. It's just kind of, it goes to show, what playing for a bad team will do. And they obviously hurt you in a plus minus.
Yeah, but they don't even I was thinking in terms of points leagues, maybe you'd want to stay away for the plus minus, but it hasn't been too bad. I mean, -2 over 14 games for Toffoli, -5 for Smith over 14 games, and Eklund is even over that stretch. So they're not even crushing you in that regard either. So they're just low owned because the Sharks, people probably aren't paying enough attention to these three. Okay, next on the list is the Tampa Bay Lightning. 6 games, 4 of which are light nights. The number 3 ranked light night schedule next week. Anthony Cirelli is probably the top option at 42% roster, but obviously might not be available in some competitive leagues. He's an interesting one though, right? I think some competitive leagues he is available and some maybe not. But he'll be a fringe guy there. Bjorkstrand at 13% and Nick Paul at 10%. Who would be your favorite of this trio?
I would probably go with, obviously if Cirelli's there, he's the clear-cut choice in terms of guys below the 50% range. But I would go Bjorkstrand after that. I'd love to see him get a little bit more run. But with the way they kind of built their lineup and him kind of being tied to Gore on that third line, it's not quite happening. Nick Paul's an interesting option as well. I just think Bjorkstrand with his shot and the amount that he likes to get it off is a bit of a more intriguing play. But that's where I'd probably draw the line. There's been weeks or weekends past where since they made the moves for the deadline, I talked about how Gord seems like a bit of a viable play as well. I think I'd stay away from him this week. I just think with the amount of options that we've talked about and a couple more teams to go through here, I think there's better options out there. You don't need to go that deep. But I'd probably go Cirelli, Bjorkstrand, and then Paul.
Yeah, if you're in such a deep league that you have to go with Yanni Gourde, you are struggling. But if that does happen, he will likely only provide you assists. He has 7 assists in his last 10 games, 0 goals, and 12 shots on goal. So he is, he's there. But I gotta agree with D. I think that I go Bjorkstrand just on the off chance too that if anyone goes down on that top power play, I would likely assume he's going in. And if you're that desperate that you're going with Tampa for this last week and you're going with these type of players, you kind of have to take shots on things like that. So for that chance, I'll take him as my obviously second behind Cirelli. But yeah, Cirelli's 30%.
Bjorkstrand was on that top power play until 1 game ago when Hagel moved up there. But yeah,
Darren Radish might be there next game. Who the hell knows? So
yeah, Radish at least they've been using as a 7th defenseman a lot lately, so you can kind of just write him off for the most part. But yeah, he's a bit of a power play specialist for them at the moment. But Bjorkstrand, decent shot volume, not a whole lot of upside. I prefer obviously the San Jose Sharks, but Cirelli I think is an interesting pickup, especially if they ever go back to that Hagel, Cirelli, Kucherov line for any extended period of time. Next on the list is the Calgary Flames. We talked a ton about last week, just a team that doesn't score a ton of goals, but they've been heating up a little bit here as of late. They've got 6 games next week, 4 of which are light nights, number 4 ranked light night schedule. Matt Coronado, I think, is the number 1 guy. Obviously, if Jonathan Huberdeau is not available. After that, it's probably a wait-and-see approach on how those lines shake out over the weekend. They've been doing a lot of moving around. Coronado's the one guy whose role feels pretty secure. I think Joel Farabee, Morgan Frost, Igor Sharangovich, any one of those guys could be viable pickups. It just all depends on how the lineups shake out over the weekend. So I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here with the Flames and talk about a guy for 5 minutes when he'll be on the third line maybe come the weekend. So I think Coronado's the one guy with, kind of a safe floor, playing big minutes, and a guy that you can rely on where he's going to be in the lineup. Beebs, I know that Coronado is a personal favorite of yours. I guess you can. The floor is yours to talk about him a little bit more this week.
Yeah, before I popped onto the mic for Big Matt Coronado here, I told myself to simmer down. I said, you know what, he's not that exciting. He hasn't scored a point in 3 games or 4 games. But then I look at it, and the guy's putting everything towards the net. He hasn't had less than 3 shot attempts in 10 games. He still has 6 points in his last 8, so he is producing. As you mentioned, we're at slim pickings here. And Coronado has one of those abilities, we kind of talked about it last week, to pop off for short spurts. And if you're looking for a short spurt of necessarily 6 games for him to pop off, he's definitely in a position to do so. Talked about it last week. He's playing significant ice time, over 19 a night most nights, which is great to see. And I think you also completely nailed it with the Frost, Sharangovich, Farabee thing. It's just keep an eye on who's there. Whoever's there is likely your guy. But if you're at that point where you're choosing from these guys, I think there's about 8 other names that we've mentioned above that I'd probably rather have. Frost, even though it does look sexy that he might be on power play 1, he just doesn't shoot the puck, and he has 3 assists in his last 7 games. So, that's what you're going to kind of get from. We've seen it happen in Philadelphia. We've seen it happen here. But yeah, Coronado, definite shout out. Still under-owned at 8%. Still playing a lot, shooting a lot. One of their main shooting options on the power play. A poor man's Pavel Dorofeyev, if you ask me. So I'll take that. I don't mind it. But yeah, I would say too, for Coronado, he's probably my next liked player on this list. That's below 30% besides the San Jose boys. So shout out, Matt. You are in my good books, unlike Simon Holmstrom.
4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points in his last 8 games, 20 shots on goal, playing nearly 20 minutes a night. Any further thoughts on the Calgary Flames?
No, I think Coronado's a really good option. And I do think, as you guys alluded to, those other names further down the lineup could be worth a kick at the can. But I do think Coronado just comes with a floor in his playing time and a little bit more upside than the rest of those guys.
And the final team on the list is the Detroit Red Wings, which we've already covered. Not a lot of options there, but I think it's worth mentioning that specifically Marco Kasper, if you want to scoop him, maybe the schedule isn't that great this weekend, but they've got 6 games, 4 light nights, pretty nice schedule next week. I mean, he could be a guy that you pick up this weekend that helps you get to the finals and then has a staying power on your roster next week. So you won't have to burn an acquisition next week if you've got a couple streaming spots on the roster. Might be a good guy to add now that's got some staying power rest of season and could be a bit of a difference maker for you down the stretch. Like I don't think that I want to tie, my next week to Vladimir Tarasenko or JT Compher, but I think Kasper's got some kind of maybe not league winning upside, but he could have a couple big games in a row here and really help you in the next couple of weeks. So given the schedule this weekend, given the schedule next week, I think Kasper makes a lot of sense. Boys, any final thoughts on week 25 streamers before I just want to talk about goalies really quickly before we go, but any final thoughts on week 25 streamers?
We did just see, keep an eye, Logan Thompson just went down for Washington. If he does, and he is out for an extended period at all, Washington has a decent schedule. Charlie Lindgren, only 33% owned, so someone you might want to look at, but he is pushing an .899 save percentage right now. So just something, by the time the show comes out, we might have further updates, but we did just, that's breaking news as we speak. So there we are. But other than that, no, definitely just keep an eye on your schedules. I made a mistake this week of wasting a pickup because I grabbed William Karlsson and realized I could only get him in on what I thought was 4 nights. I could only get him in for 1 night because he's a center.
Love that.
And because he was playing on heavy nights. So now I have Noah Hannafin. So I wasted 1 against Big Bad Brock, and that's on me. So yeah, always good to look ahead.
I was obviously just looking at that because I was updating the site with the Thompson news. I do think, as far as a replacement goes, I would look to Picard first, just because, like we said, it doesn't seem like Skinner's particularly close to a return. He's just 18% owned. So if he's out there, with the schedule we talked about that the Oilers have, 6 games, 5 of them on light nights, you're playing the Ducks, the Blues have been red hot, and then you got the Sharks, the Jets and the Kings, and then the Sharks again. So there's 3 really winnable matchups in there. He's only going to get one of the Jets or the Kings. So it's a pretty good matchup spread to close out the season for Picard, depending on, how long Stuart Skinner is sidelined. The Capitals, on the other hand, they don't play next week until I believe it's Thursday with the Hurricanes, and then they're in Columbus, and then home and home with Columbus, and then a couple of games to close it out with the Islanders and the Penguins. So you might not get any help from Lindgren until later in the week, and then he's probably still not going to see that back to back with where they're at in the standings right now. So Calvin Pickard I think is a pretty good option, but otherwise I would just keep it glued to dailyfaceoff.com if you need to replace Logan Thompson, and just look to stream in as many decent spot starts as you can.
Cannot wait to win a championship on the back of the San Jose Sharks and Calvin Pickard. This is what fantasy hockey is all about. It's what this podcast is all about. I just want to take a look ahead to this weekend really quickly, talk about some of the back-to-backs, give you some of your best streaming options for Sunday if you're desperate, trying to pull out a win here. So the Boston Bruins, we'll start there. They've got the Hurricanes on Saturday, the Sabres on Sunday. In Buffalo, I think that Jonas Korpisalo on Sunday, it's a winnable game for the Boston Bruins. Not a lot of those left on the schedule for them, but Korpisalo could be somebody that is, worthwhile. Next is the Buffalo Sabres. Obviously, they play Saturday against Lightning, and then they got the Bruins on Sunday. So depends on how they decide to shake things out. James Reimer's been their number one goalie so far. So chances are probably that James Reimer goes Saturday, which leaves UPL on Sunday. His own percentages obviously come down quite a bit with him not playing whatsoever. So if you want to take a chance on him bouncing back against the Bruins, that's a team that's not scoring a lot of goals right now. The Columbus Blue Jackets are in Toronto on Saturday and in Ottawa on Sunday. Anton Forsberg, Daniil Tarasov, I would imagine, will get Sunday in Ottawa, who will potentially be going with Anton Forsberg because they also have a back-to-back. But Tarasov in Ottawa may be a bit of a risky spot start there. I think Casey DeSmith, we talked about him. I talked about him on Twitter this week, obviously getting that start in Seattle to start the week. I mentioned probably a guy that you're going to want to try to hold on to for the week because they got a back-to-back on Saturday, Sunday. So Casey DeSmith potentially in Minnesota on Sunday would be huge. It's a team that's not scoring a lot of goals except for tonight on Igor Shesterkin. The Florida Panthers, same thing with them. Two back-to-backs this week. So Vanacek going last night. He was a great pickup against the Canadiens. Almost got the win. Didn't work out. I would imagine he gets Sunday in Detroit. Terrific matchup for Vanacek there. The Montreal Canadiens, maybe Jakub Dobiš on Sunday in Nashville, which would be a nice matchup. A team that doesn't score a lot of goals either. I mentioned Forsberg against the Blue Jackets. That one seems risky. That's a team that seems to be coming back to life a little bit here. The Pittsburgh Penguins are in Chicago on Sunday. So obviously a great matchup there. Potentially Alex Nedeljkovic, Tristan Jarry. Kind of keep an eye on who gets the nod there on Saturday. One of them will be a great spot start on Sunday. A couple more to get to here. The Vancouver Canucks with Thatcher Demko back in the mix. I would imagine they could mix things up. We don't really know who will get which game. Either way, they play the Vegas Golden Knights on Sunday. Not something you probably want to target. Speaking of Vegas, we'll see what happens with Ilya Samsonov if he comes back, but they're in Vancouver on Sunday. Again, probably a bad matchup. That Canucks offense seems to be coming back to life. So of the ones that I mentioned, obviously in Chicago, that Pittsburgh start looks pretty juicy. Vanacek's a guy that I want to hold on for the week so that he gets the Red Wings on Sunday. I think that's a really good matchup as well. And the Casey Smith in Minnesota on Sunday would probably be my three favorites. Any changes you'd make or anybody you'd want to add to the list there, D?
Maybe, did you say Jakub Dobes? He should probably get that game.
Dobiš in Nashville, I would imagine, on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to keep an eye on. He's had some big games this year, a bit of an up and down stretch, but I would imagine he gets that game unless they go Montembeau on the back-to-back. But he's had some really standout performances. I think a shutout or two. So some high upside there and a very winnable game for the Habs.
Yeah, the Nashville's basically lifeless right now.
It's fantastic. You guys you should likely only be going against three other managers on Sunday, so it won't be a total battle for these goalies. And realistically, you should have some choices here.
Tons of options, right? You're going to be able to. It's going to be nice to see some championships coming down to Jakub Dobiš and Anton Forsberg and Daniil Tarasov. Cases that
came down to
hockey's all about, baby.
Came down to Artur Silovs last year, and I believe Eric Comrie the year before that on a game that was played on an extra day. So
funny.
Why the hell not have it be a random goalie?
You draft these guys, Connor Hellebuyck in the second round. You grind since October, and it comes down to Eric Comrie and Artur Silovs. It's fantasy hockey right there in a nutshell.
Goalies are not voodoo at all.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another edition of the DFO Fantasy Podcast. Hopefully, you guys have success this weekend. Hopefully you're back listening next week. Next week, likely going to be our final episode of the season, maybe two more. And we're going to break down, help you obviously next week because it's a long week. So we'll be back next week to break some things down. And then obviously we'll close out the season with some of our, a little bit of chit chat, fantasy MVPs, all that kind of fun stuff. Look back at what we got right, what we got wrong, all that good stuff. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Best of luck this weekend. Hopefully to see you back here next week. Until then,
we'll see y'all in the finals.
Peace.